It's election time in the UK, so I have been and voted, even though for the most part I think it's a bit of a charade. You know, we're all conditioned to think it's a two-party system, and Labour and Conservative really are just two sides of the same coin. They're really not that different. If you look into what they've done, what they're going to do, they give lip service to being different, and they call themselves the opposition to kind of fool everyone into thinking one's going to be the complete opposite of the other, when they're really not. And the thing is, I can understand younger people falling for it, who weren't around or weren't old enough in the last election to really be aware of it all. But what gets me is when older people still keep voting for the uni party. It's like, did you not learn from last time? Like, there's a reason we voted Labour out last time, and before that there was a reason we voted Conservatives out. But every decade or so we just go through the same merry-go-round, Labour Conservative, thinking things will get better, even though there's actually no precedent for that whatsoever. For the, a good 2 decades now, no matter which party was in charge, things got worse. But mainstream media do a good job with their propaganda in tricking everyone to vote for the uni party with bullshit like, well, if you vote for an independent party, that's just another vote for Labour, so you better vote Conservative, keep voting for the uni party. And if everyone had that attitude, of course nothing is going to change, because everyone's just being talked into voting for the same two parties every single time and expecting different results. It baffles me, really. Like, people have a very simplistic view of it all, like, because Labour and Conservatives are supposedly the opposition to each other, one must be the complete opposite. If one is bad and everything's been crap under Conservatives, that means Labour must be brilliant and everything's going to be totally different under them. Yeah, good luck with that. Like I say, surely older people should have realised this by now, because you've been through it all before. It amazes me people would keep voting for either of those two parties. I'm kind of amazed anyone's voting. I mean, Conservatives are really tanking, but I'm still amazed that anyone's voting for them at all. Because left, right, no matter what your belief system in politics, everyone agrees that the country's terrible now. That the country's been getting worse and worse. So it's kind of strange that anyone would then vote for the party that's been in charge during all of this, when they're coming forward and saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to change everything, we're going to turn it all around. Well, you've had 15 years and you haven't done that. How can you expect anyone to believe that? It's like an abusive partner saying, oh, just don't dump me. Honestly, I'll change. Things will be different this time. But you've had 15 years to change and you haven't. It's obviously bullshit, isn't it? But at the same time, a lot of problems this country's facing now were brought upon by Labour. Because when these governments make changes, sometimes it can take a good few years before the changes really show any effect, and we see the aftermath of it. And right now we're seeing a lot of the results of decisions Labour made, unlimited immigration, which is being terribly destructive to the country. Houses are unaffordable now because there's such high demand. We're having to completely obliterate the countryside to build more, to try and keep up. We're going to have to build multiple cities worth of houses. I mean, that's going to utterly destroy the countryside. And yet at the same time, these people bleat on about how we're so concerned about the environment. Stop bulldozing it then. But they won't. And of course that also means more cars on the road, which is more pollution, as well as more roads having to be improved and expanded upon endlessly. And it's something they're never going to catch up on. Like, they'll never catch up on how many houses need to be built, and they'll never catch up on how many roads need to be improved and expanded, because as soon as they do, there'll be thousands and thousands more people on them, thousands and thousands more people needing homes, and then they've got to build even more. It's just never ending. Not that I want to digress too much into immigration as an issue, but I think that is a big issue in this election.
A fluffy kitten for every small child, in a cute little bow called Mittens.
But the propaganda's been in overdrive, and it has been since 2016. And this is why I feel like elections are a bit of a charade, because there's an old saying that if voting worked, they wouldn't let us do it, and I do think there's a lot of truth to that. There's so much manipulation in the media, as I said earlier, to get people to keep voting for the uni party, dissuade anyone from voting independently. But also, I have noticed over the last year or so, in the lead up to the elections in the UK and the US, that any dissenting voices have been hit by allegations. And the thing with allegations is they're a very good way of taking people out of the picture for a while, say over the course of an election. If you don't want someone who's got a big platform and a big audience to influence people in a way they don't want because they're speaking out against the narrative, allegations is a good way to take them out for a year or so. Because it can be a financial drain if there's legal battles, an emotional drain. It takes up a lot of their time and it delegitimizes what they say. If someone's had horrible allegations made against them, you're not inclined to listen to anything they say. So even if they get found guilty at the end of it all, that might be 6 months after something, say, like an election, has ended. And so you've done the job. You've taken them out for that period of time and delegitimized anything they say, even if it turns out they're innocent. You know, we saw this with Russell Brand. And I'm not a Russell Brand follower. I've never watched any of his videos. The only thing he did I ever liked was Russell Brand's Ponderland. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It's kind of like Harry Hill's TV Burp, where Russell Brand would take old TV clips and take the piss out of them, basically. And it was really funny. That's the only time I've ever been a fan of his. But I did find all the allegations against him, once he started speaking out against the establishment, a bit suspicious. Because the thing is, these women who made allegations against him, they hadn't been to the police. They didn't even go to the media. It's not like they'd been to the police didn't do anything, and then they turned to the media and was like, oh, please help us, no one's listening. The media looked for people who would agree to make allegations against him. Now that to me is dodgy. When you're looking for someone who will agree to make allegations. And as soon as the allegations were made public, it really was trial by media. Every media outlet was calling these people Russell Brand's victims. Now that's a deliberate turn of language. Calling them victims is saying Russell Brand is guilty, even though there'd been no arrest, no police investigation. There hadn't even been any reports to the police, let alone an arrest and a trial and a conviction. And yet straight away the media's like, Russell Brand's victims, all of his victims. That's outright saying he's guilty, he's guilty. That's trial by media. So that was all very suspicious to me. And, lots of other people, like I say, who have certain dissenting voices have been hit by allegations or just deplatformed on social media. And even recently, Reform UK have had what seemed to be hit pieces done against them. You know, Channel 4 aired a documentary where this guy came on who seemed like a completely ridiculous, exaggerated caricature of what Channel 4 and the BBC would think a Reform supporter to be like. You know, he had this ridiculous voice he was putting on, saying all these outrageous racial slurs and homophobic slurs and that, being really nasty. And like right from the get-go, I thought that this is too much. Like this, I've never met a person like this in my life. Does anyone like this exist for the last 30 or 40 years? It was just so over the top. And then of course it turns out actually this guy's an actor, and that isn't his real voice. He's quite well spoken actually. And yet they're still saying, oh no, he's completely legitimate, he just happens to be an actor. But, everything he said was genuine. It was like, why is he putting on a silly voice then? Why would you put on a silly voice if you're just being genuine and being yourself for a documentary crew to follow you around and film you? It's so suspicious. And then on BBC Question Time as well, Farage was on there and straight away someone's like, why is it that everyone you know is racist? You're racist. And it turns out the person who asked that question, all these questions are approved, of course, beforehand. You can't just go on there and randomly ask questions. The BBC will approve what you're allowed to say. But it turns out the guy who asked that question was a BBC, someone who had worked for the BBC. He wasn't a BBC employee, but he's someone who had worked for them, I think freelance. So once again, that's very suspicious. On this BBC show, they've got a guy asking questions like that, who is someone who they have employed in the past. I've voted already. I'm not going to say who I voted for or who I support. I don't influence anyone really. You should vote for who you want to vote for. But that's the thing, vote for who you want to vote for. Don't tactically vote. That's one thing I will say. I think tactical votes are just throwing your vote away. That's basically like asking you to vote for the party that you hate the least. When they say to tactically vote, you might not like this party, but you like the other party even less. So vote for this one, just to try and keep the other one out. I think that's a waste of a vote. I don't think that's how democracy should be. But you're constantly told that you've only got two options, neither of which are any good, so just vote for the one that you think is the least terrible. Like, don't vote that way, otherwise nothing will ever change. So it's a horrible feeling, really, when an election day comes along and there's no one you want to vote for. So your options are either vote for the party that you dislike the least, or don't vote at all. And I have done the old tactical voting once when I was younger, and I didn't feel good about it, so it's not something I'd do again.
River water to be replaced by lager. Rain to be replaced by sweets.
All this targets nonsense is something else that I think Labour implemented, which I think has been really detrimental to services across the UK. Because rather than trying to do the job to the best of their abilities now on a day-to-day basis, because, you know, in a lot of services every day is different, so you have to deal with things on a day-to-day basis. But once you're given targets that you have to reach, well, all of a sudden it's just about meeting the targets. How do we meet our targets as quick and easily as possible? And we've seen this I think in the police it's highlighted the most, where they focus more and more on petty non-crimes so they can meet their targets quick and easily, rather than dealing with difficult crimes, more serious crimes that might actually take time and effort, and there's no guarantee of a result. I mean, heck, even when I was at college this was an issue, because there were people there who missed a whole term of coursework, and they were just given the extra credits to pass because the college had targets they had to meet of how many people pass, and they wanted a 100% pass rate to meet these targets. So they just gave extra credits. I mean, it really makes things kind of meaningless once everything's about meeting your targets. I find the whole left-wing, right-wing thing a bit strange, really, how people are so simplistic about it. I don't know, I guess people like to simplify life in general. Like with, you know, if Conservatives are bad, Labour must be good. This very simplistic look and attitude to it all. It's the same with left and right. Like, I like to think of myself as quite central. There are some left-wing things I agree with, some right-wing things I agree with, some left-wing things I disagree with, some right-wing things I disagree with. It seems almost impossible that you could agree with every single left-wing thing and disagree with every single right-wing thing, or vice versa, unless you're just deliberately making that choice because you've sort of chosen your team, so you're just going to support your team no matter what, which isn't really critically thinking. Like, no matter how left-wing you are, there must be some left-wing things where you think, it's a bit silly, isn't it? You know? And there must be some right-wing things where you think, well, yeah, that makes sense, that's a logical way to do things. And on the flip side, no matter how right-wing you are, there must be some right-wing things where you think, oh, there's a bit much in it. And some right-wing things where you think, and some left-wing things, where you think, yeah, it's a good way to do it, it's a nice way to do it. I don't think this tribal attitude between left and right actually helps us at all. Because we've all really got a common enemy, and that is the elites. Who Labour and Conservative, I think, work for. World Economic Forum types who really don't have any of our best interests at heart other than their own and their rich buddies. And all this infighting amongst us of left and right, it just kind of divides us. It makes it easier for them. I often think of left and right wing as being like male and female. Like, left is more female and right is male. And with a family, it tends to be better off raising a child if you've got an equal amount of both. You've got the man and the woman, mother and father, so you've got an equal influence of male and female growing up. But I think it's the same with society in general. Rather than it having to be just left or just right, I think if left and right could work together, so you've got some left-wing things, some right-wing things, we'd actually have a better society. But unfortunately, it seems like it always has to be left versus right. They can't just unify and work together. But I think more people are being pushed to the right because there are so many kind of silly things at the minute that get pushed as being right-wing. And it's not even right-wing, like, right-wing doesn't seem to exist anymore. Everything now is extreme right. You're a right-wing extremist if you're ever so slightly not left. Things like, I mean, I've seen ridiculous things like health and fitness. If you don't want to be fat, if you try and keep fit and healthy and slim, that's right-wing, you bastard. If you're in favour of traditional strong family units, oh, you extreme right-wing piece of shit. If you don't think children should be physically altered dramatically with surgery or medication before the age of 16, you right-wing bigoted piece of crap. If you want to actually protect our borders and not just let randoms flood in from across the sea by the thousands every week, undocumented with no medical or criminal history on record, you right-wing bigoted son of a bitch. Like, when did all these common sense things all of a sudden become extreme right-wing? It's just ridiculous. And then they wonder why more and more people are turning right-wing. You're almost making it impossible for them not to. If you keep labelling everyone who just acts in a bit of old-fashioned common sense extreme right-wing, eventually people are going to be like, well, okay, then I am.
Misery to be phased out and replaced by happy things.
But I do often think of governments as being like abusive partners. You know, the more you let them get away with, the more they push it. As soon as you're going to dump them, they start pleading with you, promising things will change and it will be different. But the thing is, going back to the whole Labour Conservative uni party thing, if you had a partner who was abusive and you finally ditched them, then you get with someone else and then it turns out they're abusive as well, do you dump them and then get back with the ex who was abusive? Or do you try and find actually a nice new partner? And yeah, it can be scary getting with someone new because it's unknown, you don't know how it's going to work out. But surely that's got to be better than just flip-flopping between two abusive partners. Because Labour are going to get in by a landslide, it looks like. But the thing is, I don't feel like anyone really actually likes Labour. It's just that they dislike the Tories more. But what a sad state of affairs to be in. It would be nice to see the establishment elite status quo shaken up if we can break free of the uni party of Labour and Conservative. And I think the mainstream media, who are puppets of the elite establishment, have been worried by recent events and the popularity of a certain independent party. But I don't know if they will actually get anywhere though, because it's all well and good, you know, a lot of people on social media are talking about reform and there's a lot of buzz around it. But social media isn't really the real world. You know, there's a lot of people who don't go online much because they're too busy with work and family, and they don't spend time leaving comments and things. And I think a lot of those people are still at the belief that it's a two-party system. So, and also maybe more easily manipulated by mainstream media. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is just the regular status quo still at the end of this week, but we'll see. There's actually a really great episode of The Prisoner with Patrick McGowan about elections. He was really ahead of his time. He kind of got the score. So I'm going to watch that when I get home. Be seeing you.